Hello everybody, welcome back to part 7, 30 for 30 Excel VBA, real world problems and solutions. How are you doing? I hope you're finding some application for the techniques we're covering. The only reason I'm doing this is to help you save time, stress, get better quality insights in your professional life or your personal life, wherever you're using Microsoft Excel and VBA. So I hope you're enjoying the series. Let's go straight into our random problem generator. Now you'll notice I've taken a few problems off the bottom. We've done 6 so far. We started with 30, so there's 24 left. Now thank you to Matthias again. Great contributions from Matthias in this series. Matthias has actually set up the random problem generator for me in a slightly different way and allowed it to eliminate topics as we go through the topic. That was a really cool thing. So well done, Matthias, for sending that in. Thank you to Matthias and Tim for saying that we are loud and clear. 19 viewers and 6 likes. Thank you so much for being with us, guys. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the random problem generator. Now, there are the balls going around. Let's say hello to a few people. Ian Lamb in the chat, welcome. Mario, welcome. Tim Cook is with us today, welcome. Kurt is with us. Is it your first stream, Kurt? Okay, so it's not your first stream, but welcome, Kurt. Great to have you with us. And the winning ball is coming down. Okay, find the next empty row. Here it is, a bit of a classic on the Tiger channel, a real fundamental Excel VBA technique. I'd actually say it's part of a bundle of techniques that when I learnt them, took my VBA to the next level. That's because it's a dynamic technique. So when we're working with those data sets, we don't want to say to a client, well, you can only work with a data set up to 200 rows. We want our code to work for any number of rows within reason. So we need to be able to find the next empty row dynamically. We're going to look at different ways to do that in this session. Looking forward to that. Let me know in the chat. What's your favorite way to find the next empty row? I think we're going to see some of our favorites from the channel, some of our favorite constructs from the channel. Let's say hello to a few people. Welcome, Andrew Button. Good to have you with us. Andrew Button, loving the series. Fantastic stuff. Maria is with us again. Welcome, Maria. Abdul, welcome. Clara is with us today. Kiara, is it your first live stream? Good to have you with us. We said hello to Kurt. Welcome. Daniel is with us. 92 degrees. That's Fahrenheit, by the way, for our British viewers. Daniel, welcome. Zana is with us. 8 o'clock in San Francisco. Good stuff. Alan. So, Alan, you're up in Liverpool. Good to see you. I was reading a story yesterday about the Beatles and how do you want to hear my Beatles story? So I'm reading the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. Should have read it years ago. And he argues that anybody who's good at anything, they have spent a very long time doing it. So the Beatles, the rock band, you must know them from back in the day. They went to Hamburg for a few years, I think. And they played every night, 7 nights a week, 8 days a week. No, 7 nights a week. They were playing and they racked up like thousands of hours of practice time. Yeah. And they became, I mean, for me, that they are the greatest band in world music. And they did it because they got all that practice in. So you know what's coming? I'm going to draw a simplistic comparison with VBA. You've got to put the hours in. Seriously, I'm not talking about 1 hour. I'm not talking about 3 hours. I'm talking about a serious years-long commitment to Excel VBA. I've been doing it for 10 years. I'm still learning. Have I got to my 10,000 hours? I'm not sure. Anyway, that's my little aside today. Alan got me onto that because of Liverpool. Welcome, Florin. Welcome, Henrik. And I think that's everybody. If I haven't said welcome, Ian Box. DC tuning in. DC saying .end for the favorite way to get the end row. Welcome, Paul Taylor. Nikki MC, good to see you again. Okay, DC 8 days a week. Good stuff. Abdul, totally agree. I'm Messi Cristiano. Okay, let's get into this. So let me know, how many hours do you think you've done of Excel practice? You know, I think I'm around 10,000 hours with the old VBA, but have you ever sat down and tried to actually work it out? How many hours have you done in VBA? If you want, but at the end of the stream, if you remind me, I will tell you my story of how I did so much VBA, what got me to my 10,000 hours. I don't think it's actually gonna, I've actually told you about this on the stream before. So, task, find next empty row. Next empty row, and let's just re-emphasize why this is important. Well, we're going to be working with data sets in Excel. We need to be able to position data in the next empty row in the data set. You know, it's a very common thing to want to add another piece of data to a data set. And there's any number of other things we might want to do. You know, we might want to just find the size of the data set. How many rows are in this data set? To do that, we can go to the bottom and find the next empty row. So let's go ahead and let's say Beatles band member. So you're going to have to remind me, who were the members? Ringo's my favorite member, being a drummer. Then we have John, Paul, and it's George, isn't it? George Harrison. Okay. And then let's have Alt-HOW3 here, Alt-HOW3, just to save some space there. And then let's have estimated internet searches. Here we go, Alt-HOW20. Then let's have run between, and let's suppose we're talking in hundreds of thousands here, 0, 300, something like that. Control D. So we've got our random numbers here. Just a very simple data set. And you're saying to me, yeah, but Chris, that's only got 4 rows. That would be really easy to manipulate. Control Alt VV. It would be really easy just to put another row on the bottom. But I want you to imagine, yes, it's a little bit contrived, but it's a learning example. I want you to imagine that we've got 40,000 rows, 200,000 rows. I was working with a data set this morning, which had football fixture data in, soccer, that is, for the people in the US, had 200,000 rows, 150, 200,000 rows. You don't want to be scrolling up and down that database. So how are we going to find the next empty row? It's Beatles with an A. This is terrible. Alan, unacceptable there. I can understand if people have left the stream or indeed unsubscribed from the channel. I do apologize. Henrik is saying you two are better than the Beatles. The chat is exploding with some of the controversial statements I'm making here. But what about your favorite way to find the last row in the data set? And let's work through a few of them. And let's talk about the pros and cons. Because as always, yeah, we're reflective and critical practitioners. We know there's multiple ways to do it. We appreciate the pros and cons. Deploy the best one. Let's go ahead and insert a module here. Option explicit, routine. And then find next empty. And let's use .end first. So this is what DC suggested in the chat. And we're going to look at the pros and cons of this one. Okay, let's look at the syntax first. So can anybody tell me the syntax in the chat? Yeah, CRRGFUL, saying Pete Best. Pete should be at the bottom. Yeah, so who was Pete Best, by the way? Do you know? Anybody know in the chat who was Pete Best? Pros and cons. I actually saw on Twitter, sorry I keep getting sidetracked, just skip ahead if you're watching on the replay, but I saw on Twitter Pete Best wishing Ringo Starr a happy 80th birthday the other day. Wasn't that nice? So let's go ahead. We're going to start with an anchor cell at the top, and it's a good idea to give important cells that you're going to use a lot in your coding. For example, the cell in the top left corner of the database, give those named ranges. Yeah, give it a unique range name. We'll see how to do that in a second. That means if you want to put extra rows in above, for example, if we wanted more room at the top here, for whatever reason, that named range is going to go down, if you like, and it means the references in VBA are still going to be valid. So let's say here, call this range. I use something like data start, and my usual naming convention is actually to use the first name, the first letter of the sheet name. Use the first letter of the sheet name first. That means when you're looking at all the named ranges, you have a sense straight away of which sheet the named range is on. So if this was the data sheet, I'll call it D underscore data start. And this is the shorthand way of creating a named range. You've got to remember to hit enter on the keyboard now, or Excel won't create the named range. Alt-M-N on the Windows PC, just to check that we have our named range there. So we've got our anchor point. You can also click on the cell and look in the top left corner just to confirm that the named range is there. We can then go ahead and say data start. Okay, dot end, Excel down. Here we are. So what about this dot ends method? I love it. So powerful. Always using this in position control. Let's just have dot select. So what's going to happen here when I play the code? You should stop the stream if you're watching on replay and try to work it out yourself. So I'm going to hit play now. Keep your eye on cell C10 here. And we can see. So how has Excel done that? It's gone down to the bottom of the row to the next empty cell and then selected the row above that. You can kind of simulate it on the keyboard with the control and down arrow shortcut. It's doing a similar thing. It's going to go to the next empty cell. So if we did have Pete in the Beatles, maybe playing some bongos, doing some percussion, rewriting history here, then what's going to happen now? So what cell are we going to get to now? We're going to go to row 11. So I'm loving that. So for me, a pro of this technique is syntax is fairly straightforward. Is concise, I'm going to say. But a con for me is, let's have a look at one of the cons now. So who died in the Beatles first? I think it was John, wasn't it? He got assassinated. And God, it's a bit depressing for a Thursday afternoon. So what's going to happen now when we hit play? We're going to see the drawback of this technique. So I'm going to hit play now, and you can see we only go to the next empty row. So this is why when you're working with data, when you're inputting data, when you're creating some kind of form that's going to input data to a database, you've got to avoid empty cells. So that means if you've got a text box in a user form, the user hasn't put anything in there, then you need to put something in the code to put something like not entered into the cell. Having empty cells in data sets in Excel causes a lot of trouble. And this is one illustration of that. So this is a con. So does not deal with empty rows. But this is pretty cool. And you should also check out .end Excel to right, .end Excel up, which we're going to have a look at in a second. That should be .end Excel up, .end Excel down there. But you're saying to me, but Chris, you've told me not to select cells when we're doing VBA. Absolutely. We're trying to use remote referencing rather than direct referencing. Direct referencing is selecting cells and doing things kind of manually in that way. Remote referencing is not actually selecting the cells, just referencing them in VBA. That's a much, much more efficient way to execute the code. So rather than just selecting the cell, let's try allocate the last row to a variable. And let's make that our task. Let's do that with, I'm going to go ahead and use a module level variable. You're going to see why in a second. As integer is going to work in this case, but if you had a large data set, I think it's 34,000 approx. If you had a larger data set, you're going to need a long variable. Integer is going to work for us in this case. And let's say last row equals, and then we can take our syntax down here and just make a slight adjustment. Then we should be able to get the row into the database. And then we just use the row property here. Okay, John Lennon died in 1980, so he died the year before I was born. Finally giving away my age on the channel. I've got a stage age as well, which is 26. So we hit play here, and then nothing's going to happen, but our value is going into a variable. We can use the F8 key to step through stepping through the code. So now the end subline of code is highlighted, but we know Excel doesn't execute the code if it's highlighted. It's saying, I'm going to execute this line of code next. So we're still in the routine. If end sub is highlighted, hover over last row, and we can see we've got a value of 10 there. So we're getting close, aren't we? We want the next empty row though. We don't want the last row in the database, the next empty row. So you can make an adjustment here, plus 1. Then let's do our classic message box, and then the last row is, and last row, and then 0, 0, and then let's think we don't want Microsoft Excel. Let's just say complete, something like that. If we don't have these last two parts, then we're going to have Microsoft Excel in the message box. I argue that real estate where it says Microsoft Excel, that's displaying, that's really expensive real estate. That's a great opportunity for us to communicate something to the user, even if you're just saying everything's okay, just reassuring them that the macro is complete. So F5, run the code here, and we can see the last row is 11. So I suggest that as a starting point. You know, in a lot of circumstances, this is going to work, but it's not my technique of choice these days, at least, because of this drawback here does not deal well with an empty row. Yep, thank you to Daniel. Yep, dim as integer works up to 32,768. Thank you, Daniel. 32,768. So if you've got more rows than that in your database, you want to use a long variable, which is going to work for very big numbers indeed. Good. Henrik says another star born in 1981, Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Is he streaming live about Excel VBA? Who knows? Zlatan is the best. I'm a big fan of Zlatan. I said, Lee Williams says big 40 next year. Yes, indeed, Lee. Maybe we'll have a big Excel VBA party. Maybe not. We'll see. Okay, so if this technique does the job, but has some drawbacks, what technique do I actually recommend? Before we get to that, let me just tell you a little bit about Members Monday. So thank you so much to people who've joined up. We've had a good few members joining because of this series. Had Zana coming in. We've had Zara coming in. Tim has joined up as well, and had a lot of good feedback already about Members Monday. So we're going to work through real world problems that usually come from the members, or it might be something that's coming from me, something from one of my projects. We're going to take your Excel VBA towards professional level. We do that through a weekly live stream. We do that through the Members Monday Content Navigator. So every stream I index for you, and you can click and get little reports so you can navigate the stream. So I'm not just giving you a load of content. We've got the Members Monday Facebook group. You can go and get involved, people posting files there, exchanging ideas about files and things like that. And you become part of our little community. And you can see the vibes in the chat. You know, we've got positive vibes. We've got a lot of good people in Members Monday. And to be honest, like 2 or 3 of our members who are our founding members, you know, they don't even tune into these streams, and they're also complete legends. So yeah, get involved with Members Monday, and you are going to love it. I'm absolutely sure. Okay, so let's have find next empty row. Let me know in the chat, what do you think is my preferred technique? If anybody can get this. Yeah, Paul says we should do 40 for 40. Good stuff. Kiara, this is a very nice comment here saying that I look 32 at most. Fantastic stuff. Henrik is off, but Henrik's going to do a late night VBA session. But I'm asking you, people who've looked at my video, Excel VBA Position Control Mastery in 13 one-line macros. I recommend that video if you're struggling with position control, or if you want to just see some really cool position control techniques and what I actually use in my work. It's called, yes, Excel VBA Position Control in 13 one-line macros. But what do you think in the chat? What technique do I actually use? Abdul's here saying, yeah, create a counter variable, then using the range function to create a dynamic range reference, then put it in a loop that tests the content of that variable. That's probably going a bit further, Abdul, than what we're doing. All we're doing is trying to find the next empty row. Yeah, that's all we're doing to begin with. Then we can use that empty row to input some data, put it in a variable, tell Excel to put the data, or maybe we want to define the whole data set. All we're focusing on today is that specific thing of identifying the next empty row. So anybody in the chat, can you tell me what my favored technique is? I'll keep an eye on the chat. And let's say Chris's way here. Chris Way. Okay, yeah, DC, good point here. Loops can really slow down code, but you could put that range in an array and loop through that. Yep, that's possible. I would say it depends how you're doing the loop though, DC. You know, there's definitely some inefficient ways of looping and more efficient ways of looping. So, you know, it depends how you're doing that loop. And we're going to touch on that topic later in the series, by the way. So, last row. So we're going to use the last row variable again. Can you see why I made the last row variable module level? Are you using module level variables in the chat? Today, it just saved me time because it meant I didn't have to declare the variable in each subroutine. Yeah. But a module level variable, the variable is going to remember its value even when the routine has finished. So if you need to pass data between routines, and it's a good idea to modulate your routines, you know, use multiple small routines rather than one big routine. If you're doing that, and that's a good approach, you might want to pass variables, pass values between the routines. That's where module variables can be really helpful. So let's build this up, and let's start with our anchor range here. So D, data start. And I'm just going to start with the end of the spreadsheet. Have you ever got to the end of Excel? Ever completed Excel? I know a few people out there have been completing Netflix in the past few months. But if we say, how to do this? Actually, let's do it this way. Let's say rows.count. How about that? Rows.count. Okay, and then I'm going to copy paste this line of code down. So there will be a duplicated line of code, this module. You know, that's generally not good practice. So what's going to happen here? What's going to flash up in the message box now? And this is an illustration of another cool piece of syntax. So this piece of syntax is going to tell us the number of rows in the spreadsheet. That's not the last row of the data set. That's the last row of the spreadsheet. So it's not quite what we want, but it's an intermediary step. We're going to build from there to get the information that we want. So I'm going to run this macro, play the macro. Aha, overflow. So what happened there? Can anybody see what happened there? Well, if we change this to a long variable, then it should work now. So that overflow error is Excel saying, listen, the value you're trying to put into my integer variable is more than 32,000. Overflow, the number is too big. Change it to a long variable. It should be able to handle the long numbers now. So last row is 1,048,576. As any good Excel VBA developer knows, I don't think I actually know that. How many rows are in a spreadsheet? 1,048,576. So that's kind of interesting for us because the logic is that we're going to use that last row as an anchor point. Yeah. Rather than using this cell as an anchor point, we're going to start at the bottom of the spreadsheet and then say to Excel, start at the bottom and keep going up until you get to a cell that has data in. Interesting. So actually the opposite approach to what we did before we started at the top and said, go down until you find an empty row. Now it's the opposite approach, and it mitigates this weakness that I was talking about. If we have an empty row, this second approach is going to deal with that. That's why it's my go-to technique for finding the next empty row. So we're going to use the cells referencing technique. I've got a series on the channel called Excel VBA Cells for Beginners. Super powerful referencing technique. So cells 1-1 is going to select the, it's going to work with the, with cell A1. So nice referencing technique there. Rows first and then columns. Now we're going to go for column C, the third column in the file. That's because it's the column that has data in, the first column in the data set. So the third column. And then now, so this is going to get us to the last, let's just prove this quickly. Okay, I know I'm being a little bit verbose here, but it's all good stuff. And let me just show you where this gets Excel to. Where does Excel get to with this line of codes? The last row is, don't worry about the last row is, but range C, 1,048,576. So that's where Excel is getting to. I'm going to change this back to long now. I had to change that to a string variable because I wanted to put the address property in. The address consists of a letter and a number. Excel is going to understand it as a string, which is a piece of text. So if we're starting down at the bottom, we can then say to Excel, go up until you get to a row that has data in. How cool is this? So let's give this a go now. And as I said, this is the way this is the technique I'm actually using in my professional implementations now. We've got the last row is 10. Pretty cool. So again, we just need our adjustment here. This is going to give us the next empty row. And as I said, a pro of this technique, it can handle empty cells in the data set. And a con of this technique is make sure there is no additional data after the data set. Can you see how that's going to cause a problem? If somebody said, wrote a note here and then ran the routine, what's going to happen now? Again, if you're watching on replay, stop the video and try to guess what's going to happen here. Okay, so I'm going to play this routine now. Lift up into your screenshot here, play this routine, and we're going to see we've now got row 13 here. That's because it's been kind of stopped by this piece of text. So this is the kind of thing you want to avoid. I find that's quite rare that someone's going to go to the bottom of a data set, particularly a big data set, and write something down there. But I have seen it happen. I've seen it happen many times. I've seen people try to do their analysis at the bottom of a data set. And this is a very common problem. It's a very common theme for me to be talking about. Proper overall design for your Excel file. You shouldn't have the analysis hanging around at the bottom of a data set. I would even say you shouldn't really have the data and the analysis on the same sheet. Move the analysis to a different sheet. Have a nice dashboard for your customer to look at and a nice data set for your customer to look at. You're going to avoid some of the problems while you're feeling some of the problems now that come from having not having clear roles for each sheet in the file. And I always say, if there's one thing that you've got to do, if you can get good overall file structure, it's going to simplify everything. It's going to simplify formula building. It's going to simplify coding. You might not need any VBA if you get the right overall file structure. So you've got to be thinking on the structural level. We're doing that all the time in Members Monday. Click join below this video to get involved. Okay, so this is looking good now, I think. Last row is 11. And let's prove this by putting Pete back into the Beatles. Pete, love you, man. And then the last row is now 12. The last row, that's not quite right. Let's make this accurate. It's the next empty row, isn't it? The next empty row is, play this. The next empty row is 12. There we go. So 2 ways to find the next empty row. And as I said, a nice kind of starter way to get you into this technique and get you using this powerful piece of syntax: end Excel up, end Excel down, end Excel to left, end Excel to right. And then, as I said, combining this with cells, rows.count, the total number of rows in the spreadsheet. This gets us to the bottom of the spreadsheet and then works up. And that has this, well, I think is really the critical advantage, if that makes sense. That's the reason I use it, is that it can handle empty cells in the data set. So let me know in the chat, does that make sense? Let's get the chat up here. What are people talking about in the chat? Haven't been watching for a while yet. Matthias has put his contribution in there. Yeah, Daniel, absolutely right. That technique avoids the empty row in the middle of the data set. Great job, Matthias. DC, how would you do it, DC? Okay, you're talking about arrays there. Good stuff. Okay. Okay, Andrew saying the last row number is only valid in Excel 365 2013 onwards. Okay. Okay, is that because that's when Excel's capacity expanded? Is that why, Andrew? Hopefully that's not a problem for most people anyway. Good, and Daniel says, yeah, I believe there are 17. That's a lot of cells. Can we do that? Can we quickly find the number of cells in an Excel spreadsheet? Let's see if we can do that quickly. I think I've tried to do this before and failed, but let's see. Okay, and let's just say message box. Is it as easy as cells.count? Let's have a look. How did you do it, Daniel? Okay, overflow. Let's try it this way. Dim number of cells as long. Number of cells equals cells.count, and then message box number of cells. Is this going to do it? Let's see if I can't do it today. Cells.count says DC. Okay, F5. Okay, still got overflow that. Okay, what if we put the sheets object in here? Okay, yeah, still getting overflow there. Yes, bigger than long. Okay, so the long variable, what's the upper limit of the long variable then? That's interesting. That's not something I know off the top of my head, but even the long variable does have some kind of upper limit there. Interesting. So it's difficult. Is there a way to do that, to actually externalize the number of cells in the spreadsheet? We could do it in chunks, I suppose. So the capacity of the long variable plus the capacity of the long variable plus the capacity of the long variable. Maybe we could do it that way. Paul says long. So that's all we need. We just need a long variable. Does this actually? No, I don't think Paul's being serious there, but that would be good, wouldn't it? If we could get that long variable in. Okay, guys, any further questions? Oh, Daniel's multiplied the number of rows by the number of columns. I see. Okay, very nice. Yeah, we could do that in the spreadsheet maybe. God, you've made me want to do it now, Daniel. So we could do this kind of manually by going to the last column in the spreadsheet. So control right cursor. I'm going to give you the whole screen view here. Okay, equals column. Here is going to give us the column number. Okay, so 16,384. I'm going to copy that value into this cell, Control Alt V, and then Control and down arrow is going to give us the last row in the spreadsheet. So if we say equals row, that's what I'm typing in there, equals row, and then copy that value, Control C up here, Control Alt V. So that gives us the number of columns, number of rows. Let's zoom in here quickly. And the number of cells. So this cell multiplied by this cell gives us the number of cells there. So that's how we can kind of do it manually. Maybe we could do that with VBA. Kiara suggesting we're getting some good names in. I think maybe we should share these with Microsoft. Good names for variables, super duper long. And oh, is Paul Taylor serious about the long variable? Oh, the double variable. Okay, maybe that's a way to do it with variables. Oh, is long actually a data type? Okay. Okay, I wasn't aware of that. Good stuff. Okay, guys, So hope you got something out of that. Stream position control, so important. So make sure you can find the last row in the database. It's going to help you position data at the bottom of a data set in a cool and dynamic way. Make sure you're trying it out, guys, and I will see you same time, same place tomorrow. Take care.